All right.
Bueno, bienvenidos a todos. Ahora vamos a continuar con el segundo panel.
Kindly invite to the front Clemente de Valle y Maria José Naranjo. Please come to the front. Thank you. And then we have also two speakers which are joining us online as well. I just got the confirmation. Perfect. So we have a different setting as yesterday. So we have like on the one, we have the speakers here on that side, not in the front, because then we can also see you two, Marta, Sebastian, very warm welcome. I hope you see us here in the front. Hello, nice to see you again. And yeah, looking forward to this to this panel. We are looking a bit about innovative instruments. We have discussed it this morning already here in the room. We have introduced a bit about different financing options for biodiversity, climate change, but also had a look at first look at debt nature swaps. And now we are very happy to have you here in the panel to discuss a bit further, to really get also some practical insights from your work, what you are doing already in this field. And we would actually like to start to introduce to the panel, the first panelist who will give an opening statement. Very happy to have you here, Clemente de Valle. He is Director of Regional Center for Sustainable Finance at the Universidad de los Andes. He is an expert in capital markets with more than 35 years experience in design and promotion of innovative financing and resource mobilization. Among others, he has also worked for several years, more than 14 years, I think, right, in the World Bank Group. His background, he's an economist with a master's degree in economics from the same university where you're now working, Universidad de los Andes, and also from the London School of Economics. So I would like to ask you maybe to kick us off a bit and explaining us why is it crucial for financial institutions, especially for DFIs, in support the transition towards a climate resilient economy, maybe a bit like provide us a big picture.
Thanks, Jonas, and thanks to One Coldex and IDFC for the invitation to be part of this panel. And I need to disclose that I was also a development and a DFI for more than nearly 7 years. I had the pleasure to establish a new DFI in Colombia for infrastructure, and we were probably one of the first in the world. I mean, I know my friends from in India and Indonesia that had private capital in the DFI, which is not common. I mean, and the name here of this bank is called FDN, which is focalized in infrastructure. Well, Jonas invited me to be suggestive. I mean, to really try to also bring the discussion a little bit more strategic at the strategic level, because you've been doing a lot. I mean, and I've been hearing a bit of some of the presentations, a lot of detailed information on instruments, strategies. So I thought that it would be good to bring the discussion at this point into the importance of what you do and what you need to do precisely in this agenda. And the way to understand the importance is, again, going back to the reason. The reason is the size of the needs, and the size of the needs are huge. When you look at the development goals, or when you look at the net zero commitments, and now when you see at the needs that you have for reducing the damage in biodiversity, we're always talking about that we need to invest between 5, 10, or 15 trillion trillion dollars a year, and more than half of it has to be in the developing world. So when you have those kind of numbers, one realizes that we're doing very little compared with the needs. And particularly in the case of biodiversity, I think that what is very, very interesting is this connection with climate change. I mean, in some way, climate change is a major source of the destruction of biodiversity. And the destruction of biodiversity is actually increasing the problems of climate change. So there is a circular relationship between those two dynamics. And therefore, in some way, you need to work. The two agendas are very, very close, and they need to be developed in a very close way. So they are not like two different topics. No, they are basically a very close thematic that needs to be addressed in a very systematic way, because it is the source of a systematic risk if it's not approached properly. So starting from the importance and the need of resources, then the question is, what is the role of DFIs when you're talking of this front? And my total conviction is that it will be very difficult to mobilize this amount of resources if DFIs don't lead the way. Jonas was asking me whether DFIs, are they in the front seat or in the back seat? And I have to say, I don't think DFIs are still in the front seat. I think they're getting prepared, but they are not there yet. DFIs and in some way need to lead the way means being the first ones to actually develop the first products, develop the first projects, be able to take, in some cases, even more risk. But they have to do it with knowledge. I mean, for me, I'm a strong believer that risks are not to be run away from, but risks have to be understood, have to be managed, have to be measured, and then they have to need to develop strategies to manage those risks. And it's the only way that financial institutions are going to be able to help the transformation and the transition that is needed. So we need a lot of, we need capital, we need seed capital in many of these enterprises and these projects. You need blended funds. You need instruments like the bonds or many of the instruments that have been. But in many cases, it requires institutions that are willing to be the first ones to raise their hand and say, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to show the way to the private sector. Private sector, in general, in my opinion, is a little bit more resistant and less willing to do it if they don't see the development banks are taking the lead and are actually taking the first step. I remember when in your hat, when I was in your hat, and we were confronted one of the largest PPP programs on infrastructure for Latin America. When we created FDN, we needed to mobilize close to $15 billion for PPPs. And Colombia had only mobilized 1 or 2 billions. When we created it with the idea that we had to be a crowding-in institution, that we really needed to invite the private sector and we needed to lead the way because the private sector was not so familiarized with the project finance risks. People were saying, no, I mean, if the project is well-structured, that's enough. I mean, we don't need development banks here. That was the argument that private sector was giving us. And 15 years after, our conclusion was that market, the Colombian market on project finance for PPPs would never have developed the way it did develop if this institution had not led the way. And that's why I'm convinced that even for this particular topic, the biodiversity topic or the climate change topic, you need institutions that understand the risks, that are willing to take and willing to manage those risks, that are willing to show the private sector how to do it. They are willing to invite the private sector to be part of it. But one of the biggest, most important things is knowledge. I mean, you really need to strengthen your capacities. And I think this kind of exercise that you're doing here is fundamental. You need to build knowledge on this. I mean, there's no rocket science, but if you don't know about it, if you don't really get into understand what are the risks really linked to biodiversity or the risks linked to climate change, it will be difficult to lead the way. If you have, in addition to that, willingness to take risk, and third, you have government support that is willing to put funds, because I'm convinced that many of these transformations are going to need funding that is blended, that is going to need resources from public sector and not big governments, I hope the $100 billion, we should be able to take some of those $100 billion that have been promised for so long and should be part of those blended funds that institutions like the DFIs should lead. I mean, I think the DFIs are the ones who can lead the management of some of those funds, of those blended funds, to support particular programs in different sectors. And maybe the last thing that I'll say, and maybe second round, when we're talking about the biodiversity, I feel that the discussion has been a bit too biased towards forests and protection of the forests and the jungles, which I think is very important. But we're not doing enough, and we're not focusing enough on things like land use. At the end, is through sustainable agriculture, through sustainable cattle, even sustainable infrastructure building and construction. If we don't incorporate biodiversity in all of those developments, we're not going to have the major impact that we needed. So if we only focus on protection of the forests, which is completely justified and needed, we're going to do only a small piece of what the world needs. So these other sectors, like agro, construction, are sectors that this industry is much more familiarized. I mean, you are much more familiarized with those industries, and you've been funding those industries. The question now is, how do you incorporate biodiversity in the programs that you need to finance going forward? How do you incorporate this dimension? And it's the same way that we've been incorporating sustainability into many of these transactions. So I really encourage that the work that needs to be done more immediately is also to address sustainable agriculture, sustainable construction, sustainable infrastructure, because we will have major impact if we do it, if we start working on those fronts as well.
All right. Thank you so much for this very strategic overview. Okay, what needs to be done, where we do have to work on. And let's move from this level to the practical level. And I would like to dial in here at this moment Marta Bandeira de Freitas. She's climate manager at Climate Department, Energy Transition and Climate Area at BNDES. She is an engineer, has a master degree in climate change and energy planning. Marta, very warm welcome. Also, we heard that that you could not manage it at the end to come here to be physically with us, but great that you are joining us online. I would like to address you this question, or the last sentence which Clemente has said. So, how do you incorporate biodiversity, climate change in your operations, but also in your investments? Maybe we start here.
Yes, I was supposed to be there with you, but unfortunately there was a problem. I didn't have a vaccine certificate. I had a vaccine and I had a certification, but I didn't have the official certification, so I couldn't get into the plane. But fortunately we have technology and I could join online. So first of all, thank you for the invitation, and IDFC, Bancodex, and to be in this great event where we are discussing so many important things and innovative things. And my idea here is to share with you some experiences of BNDES. I'm going to talk a little about two experiences that probably you have already known. No, but I will detail them a little bit more because I think they are very, very relevant. The first one is the Amazon Fund, which everybody knows is the biggest REDD+ fund in the world. But it's important to highlight that the Amazon Fund is a results fund. So Brazil first halted the deforestation between 2004 and 2012 with a command and control public policies. And then we were paid for providing this ecosystem services to the planet by preserving the forests. So I think these mechanisms of results funds that are based on results, they are more efficient. And the Amazon Fund is a very good example of that. So with these resources, we were able to invest in more nature-based solutions to preserve more the forest. So the fund, the efforts of the fund is to promote the preservation, the sustainable use of the forest as well, which brings also social benefits for the population that lives in the Amazon region. And the fund has already supported 111 projects, has raised $712 million, and has disbursed already $615 million. So it's a big fund. We're almost hitting the $1 billion number, and we are being able to invest in very good projects. One thing that I would like to highlight here is the governance of the Amazon Fund. There is an advisory committee that is formed in balance of composition between the civil society, the federal government, and the Amazon state governors. And the civil society is represented by the traditional and indigenous peoples of the Amazon region. And this committee is the organ that decides how the money should be invested. So this organ is very important for the governance of the implementation and the use of the resources. BNDES is the operator of the funds, so we generate we don't generate, but we receive the products, we design instruments, and we follow up the projects. And another thing that it's important to mention in the Amazon Fund is that the results of the projects, they are measured. And we have a robust methodology based on a theory of change framework with clear objectives, goals, and indicators that are measured annually. And these indicators are reported annually in the report of the Amazon Fund, and this report is public. It's in the site of the fund. So all the results of all the projects that are done with the fund's resources are there, are transparent. So governance and transparency of the Amazon Fund is very important. With almost more than 10 years of operation of the fund, okay, we had some years that the story, we had to stop to invest, but we were following up the projects. But we have more than 10 years operating the fund, and so it became a credible platform. And what BNDES is doing now is trying to fundraise more money to the Amazon Fund. Why? Because it's there, it's credible, it's working, and it's easy. So we were able, and it's a results fund, so we have to do our homework. So since last year, in 2023, Brazil has decreased deforestation in a relevant number. Other countries are again donating for the fund. The United States, Switzerland, and Germany again. So we were able to create a credible platform to fundraise concessional money for the preservation of the Amazon forest. And one thing that we are doing is one of the new programs that we are using the Amazon Fund resources that I like to mention here is the Restaura Amazônia. And I'm talking about this program because it is the first initiative of the arc of the restoration, the restoration arc. The restoration arc is a territory, it's a half-moon territory that is very prescient by deforestation and is in the fringe of agriculture. And it used to be called the deforestation arc, and then we rename it for the restoration arc, The idea here is to leverage money so we could restore this territory and create a buffer to protect the heart of the forest. And the first initiative of the Arc of Restoration is the Restaura Amazônia, which we are using $100 million from the NDS, from the Amazon Fund, to restore big degraded areas in this territory to protect the forest. The fund is a match funding, so we for each dollar that BNDES apports in the program, we will find other partners to double, triple, and leverage how much money is possible for the fund's resources. So private companies, other governments, other banks, development bank, multilaterals could join this initiative. But we won't stop there. We won't stop in concessional money because as it was said here, the amount of resources that is needed to preserve and restore nature is huge. Only in the Arc of Restoration, we are talking about $40 billion to be implemented until 2050. The objective is to restore 6 million hectares of priority areas by 2030. That will require $10 billion. And in the second phase, which goes up until 2050, the idea is to restore 18 million of hectares, and we will need $30 billion for that. So it's a lot of money, and concessional money won't do it. We will need other instruments. And talking about that, I will bring the second example of BNDES and the Brazilian government to which is a platform and a fund that also provides resources for biodiversity and climate projects, which is the Brazilian Climate Fund. The Brazilian Climate Fund was created in 2009 with the Brazilian climate policy. The resources comes from taxation of the oil and gas companies, but last year the Brazilian government emitted a sovereign green bond and raised about $2 billion for the climate fund and apported this money in the climate fund. BNDES is also the operator of the credit portion of this fund. And the interest rate for nature-based solution projects will be very low with this new report. It will be 1%. And so the idea is that Brazil will continue to emit green bonds and apport and continuously raise resources to the climate fund. But the idea is also to receive donations from other countries and multilaterals and national development banks, because it's already a platform which is there, it's regulated, it was created by law, and BNDES is the operator of this fund. The idea is to blend concessional money with credit money to make the interest rates as low as possible for nature-based solution and climate projects. So I gave here these two examples because they are examples that are already put in place. And so we don't have to invent the wheel again. And they are both operated by a national development bank with credibility, with good social, environmental, and climate management system. And both have good governance mechanisms because the Climate Fund also has a committee that decides how the money is going to be spent. So I think that the national development banks and the multilateral banks should focus in fundraising concessional money and low interest rates credit for NBS, because nature-based solutions need incentives to be feasible. Because as was said here again, the risks are very high. We're talking about, if we restore a forest, we're talking about the fire risk, deforestation risk. And so the risks are very high. It's a sector that is not consolidated, and we see that many people are wanting to invest, but everybody is afraid of risks and afraid of the risk. And so by saying that, another action that the development banks could do, which is a huge bottleneck for this type of projects, is to give these projects guarantees. The developers, the companies that are developing these projects, they're new. They don't have the proper collaterals for the project's risks, which are very high. And also the revenue of these projects still counts on voluntary carbon markets and the products of the forest, which both are very uncertain. And so the risks are very high. So giving guarantees to these projects, first loss guarantees, create a fund and mechanisms that could fundraise other actors, other financial actors, even commercial banks, to come, could scale up projects to achieve the amount of money that we need, because concessional funds is not going to be enough. And by talking about carbon market, I think that the development banks, they have to address that somehow, and for nature, especially for the restoration projects. And here, when we're talking about restorations, I'm saying of all biomes. Brazil has 5 biomes. We have the Amazon, we have Caatinga, we have Cerrado, Pantanal, Pampa, the Mata Atlântica, we have the coastal zone. So when we're talking about restoration of biomes, we could use, I think, the carbon market, even the voluntary carbon market, could be an instrument to implement and accelerate these restoration projects. And how can the development banks help that to happen? For instance, design project finance instruments. If a restoration company, has already a contract of selling the carbon credits that they will generate, we can use this contract as guarantee. But the problem is the non-performance guarantee. That's the pre-completion guarantee. That is the bottleneck that the development banks could address. Another thing that we could address in the carbon market is to provide standard contracts for buying and selling of carbon credits. So the negotiation between sellers and buyers are more transparent. And we can use these contracts as guarantees afterwards, because we will rely on them because we created them. Another thing, we can estimate a shadow price. The pricing of carbon credits is crazy. And we can estimate, make a methodology to estimate a shadow price, which will also create credibility in the market. So these are just a few examples of what the development banks could do to boost the credit finance for the restoration sector. And since I have already talked too much, and another thing that I would like to address here is about a mechanism. Since I was talking about carbon credits and carbon markets, we need, as fast as we can, to create a mechanism to put a price on nature. I know it sounds horrible to say that, to put a price on nature, but we have to internalize the externality. And the literature, the scientific literature about valuing nature is huge and very complex. And I think we have to create something that is simple as to pay by hectare, dollar for hectare preserved, area preserved. It has to be, I don't know if it's possible, but it has to be as simple as that. The carbon credit market worked because the metric is 1 ton of CO2 equivalent. So maybe here the metric should be preserved area, number of hectares preserved. But the tropical forest has more ecosystem services than Cerrado or then the peatlands. Oh no, but the number of species, the amount of fresh water. If we enter this complexity, it's not going to happen. And I think we have to keep simple as dollar per preserved area. I don't know if the discussions are going that way, but I think it's the way we should go. And we have to do it fast. So we want to achieve the COP15 Global Biodiversity Framework goals. Otherwise, we won't do that. And since I have already talked a lot, I'm going to mention 3 other examples that BNDES is doing to finance nature-based solutions. And the first one is a blended finance public call that BNDES launched to leverage capital market instruments to finance NBS and climate projects. The other one is the Sertão Vivo program. This is a big program financed by GCF, IFAD from FAO, and BNDES to support climate adaptation projects in the northeast of Brazil, which is a semi-desert area in Brazil, which has a lot of poverty. And in this Sertão Vivo program, there will be a part of the program that will be used to restore the Caatinga, which is the biome of this area, of this territory. And with the restoration of this biome, that will generate carbon credits that will go back to the communities that are being beneficiated by the projects. And these communities will also receive cisterns to capture the rainwater for agriculture production and animal creation, to generate income for them and to protect them from droughts and severe droughts that's going to happen more frequently. And the last one I will mention, Floresta Viva, which is another match funding platform that BNDES is leveraging resources to restore other biomes of Brazil, Mata Atlântica, Cerrado, and I'm wrapping up. I'm finishing, I promise. And with Floresta Viva, we are also financing the restoration of peatlands and coral reefs in Brazil. And these projects will also generate carbon credits for the companies that are match funding BNDES's resources. So thank you very much. I just like to share these experiences of BNDES, and I hope we could have a good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Marta. I think it was really worth the time. You have said, okay, I talked too much. No, you didn't talk too much. I think it's very worth also for us, like, to hear your experience from BNDES. Very, very pity that you're not here with us, like, to discuss also like all the other issues here in the room. So really, thank you so much for this first intervention. Now we move from Brazil to Colombia. Just before I introduce the next speaker, when we are discussing in Germany, like with our students as well in Frankfurt School, like, okay, what were good examples in sustainable finance around the world? When we're talking about Latin America, it's basically Brazil and Colombia. So we know we're moving to Colombia, and we are very happy to have one of the hosts of this training with us, Maria Jose Naranjo. She's Corporate Strategy Vice President at Bancoldex. Her background is in business administration, and she also holds a Master of Arts in International Relations. You're with Bancoldex a very long time already, more than 23 years. I think you have seen everything in the bank, also like how the transition has taken place. So maybe my first question, like, okay, how do you see the transition like towards like more sustainability activities in Bancoldex? And the second question, like a bit more practical, what is the approach the bank is following concerning implementing instruments for climate change adaptation, nature-based solution, but also climate adaptation?
Great, thank you very much for that nice introduction. And for you all, I hope you're having a wonderful time here in Bogota. I hope last night you had a nice time and you had good food and you're enjoying Bogota. I think you're maybe a little bit tired, so I will try to be as brief as possible. And we are understanding what all this is about, and we are designing, we have designed in Bancoldex a very strong sustainability strategy. And in that strategy, we have some pillars. One of them is focused especially on green growth. And in that pillar, we are addressing and we are trying to understand how we can help enterprises and especially micro businesses to mitigate and to adapt to climate change. So that I would say, Jonas, is the first statement. Well, in this kind of matters we have, and Clemente said it, learn a lot. And we are learning as a development bank, but also we have to facilitate knowledge to the banks that are working with us. Because as you know, some development banks are second-tier banks, and what we do in our case is we lend money to intermediaries, and then they lend to the enterprises. So that is how it works. So in this specific theme of mitigation and adaptation, what we did, and is maybe I will be very brief, Jonas, to share with you a special line, blended finance instrument that we designed with the United Nations Peace Fund. What we did first is understanding what was going on with mitigation and adaptation in the regions. As you know, Colombia has 32 departments and more than 1,000 municipalities, and each of them has a very specific situation or is more vulnerable than the other one if we're talking about being strong enough to adapt to climate change. So the first thing is we understood Colombia as a country of regions, and understanding what were the different situations. Then we understood what were the needs of especially the micro businesses. They don't know how to adapt. They don't know how to understand. They don't know how to go to a bank. So we, of course, understood that the first ally we had was the microfinance institutions. And we have in Bancoldex more than 100 allies, financial allies, especially 70 allies that irrigate the credit in the regions. And they go to the micro business and they go understanding what they need. So that's the second big part of the story. First, understanding the region and how they are vulnerable to facing climate change. And the second thing is what micro businesses need. So when we understood that situation, we we designed with the Fund of Nation, with the United Nations Peace Fund, a blended finance nice instrument. Why do I say nice? Because it has a very strong impact in terms of social impact, and of course in terms of green and environmental field. Then we co-create this credit special line in better conditions, better terms, better tenor, and lower interest rates. And we decided with, of course, this fund that the special credit line would only be focused on 179 municipalities that are highly hit by violence here in Colombia. So that is the part of the impact, the social impact. They need to be supported because it's the way they're going to grow, it's the way they're going to live. So if natures come, sometimes nature can be very friendly. Like here, we're happy, we're in a very nice garden. But sometimes nature hits very hard. So we understood that violence was part of the equation, and this is why this line, credit line, is only focused on micro businesses that are located in 179 municipalities here in Colombia. This is the first thing. And the second thing is that we lend for them to implement some projects in terms of ecotourism or greenhouses or any kind of solutions that they would implement to protect their business. And that is, the nice result of this is, of course, a smaller scale of figures of BNDES, and Clemente was mentioning that here the needs are huge, and of course, Colombia has huge needs in terms of transition. But in the case of Bancoldex and this instrument I'm talking about is very, very low scale. It's a very low scale because, of course, micro businesses need very low amount of money. Their capacity and their risk assessment is limited. And then we did this good and strategic liaison with the intermediaries, the microfinance institutions. And of course, we understood that they also needed knowledge in terms of development and sustainable development. And that is why we did a very nice, we received from SECO here, Mario, our friend, is helping us to receive international cooperation to help microfinance entities in the regions to enhance their knowledge in terms of development and sustainable development. So that would be very nice, and that would be very important because we need them to know and to know how to assess risk and to understand that kind of specific project in the regions. And let me finish by this, Jonas. I would like to share only 3 lessons. The first lesson we learned from the beginning, from the moment we designed this credit line with the United Nations, until now, we've disbursed 2,000 micro credit, which is not a big figure, but is good enough. We've been through maybe more than, we've disbursed $2 million. It's not wow, but it's very important and it's good enough for the region. And in terms of social impact, is a huge result, because those families, those micro businesses are really grateful, and they understand that if they don't implement the project, they won't have enough money to grow and to survive. This is the first. The first lesson is, of course, work with the microfinance entities. The second lesson is language has to be simplified because micro businesses don't understand what they're supposed to be. And finally, the third lesson is that we as development, maybe Marta said it, we have to design and we have to be innovative and we have to think in good alliances between public and private sector. You mentioned it, Clemente, in a huge scale and very big numbers. But here it has to be in small scales, and there we have the possibility to impact a lot of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. So I would finish by saying that we have to be innovative, we have to share our knowledge, not only for us as development banks, but also for the micro institutions. And finally, and more than important, we have to simplify language for them and also for us.
Thank you so much. I think a good word, and already see here the reaction directly speaks for itself. Thank you so much. Now we move again more to a different, like from a local level or national level, now to you, Sebastián Vargas Macedo, for working at the IDB. You're a financial consultant in connectivity, markets and finance division at the Inter-American, as I said, Development Bank. In his role, he's structuring, he's in charge of, among others, structuring of financial sector operations across Latin America. And also what I found very interesting, that you also were a key contributor to the structuring of and implementation of Debt for Nature conversion in Barbados and Ecuador. We actually had, just before the lunch break and before the session we deeply discussed it, we started discussing it. So maybe my question to you, maybe can you explain a bit what have you done, how these deals came about, and what was your role, especially at IDB, for that?
Sure. Thank you, everyone. Pleasure to be here. So if you allow me, then I can start directly talking about these operations. The first one we did was in Barbados. That was in 2022. Although it closed in 2022, these are not fast operations in terms of preparation. They involve a lot of previous work, because there is not only the financial component of a transaction, but also the conservation component, which involves a long process of defining the management plans of the conservation area, defining the strategic goals that you want to pursue. So it was a long work in which were involved not only the IDB and the Nature Conservancy as international, as a multilateral development banks and international financial institutions, but other NGOs and more specialized organizations that supported and did a lot of the groundwork in terms of conservation and marine planning. So it was an operation that involved all these parts, but maybe from my experience, I can talk more comfortably and in more detail from the financial side. So this operation consisted in a credit guarantee that we provided together with the Nature Conservancy. Like, we provided $100 million in credit guarantee. The Nature Conservancy provided $50 million. And this allowed the country to repurchase outstanding debt and replace it with new one with better financial terms. Or not only in speaking about interest rates, but also about tenor. No? So this transaction allowed to generate approximately $50 million in savings that will be destined to allocated to finance conservation activities in Barbados marine space during the next 15 years. And this will be done through an independent public-private conservation trust fund. And an important element of these transactions, moving a little bit beyond the financial part, is that the country agrees to a series of conservation commitments related, in this case, to marine conservation. So in case the country is not able to achieve the targets under these commitments, it has to pay and it has to transfer extra payments as a kind of penalty. But in contrast to the traditional structures related to bonds, either thematic or SLBs, these extra payments or penalties do not go to the investors, but rather they go back to conservation activities. No? They are channeled to this independent trust fund, and these are extra resources that these trust funds will manage to fund a series of activities, in this case, destined to protect biodiversity in Barbados and promote a sustainable blue economy in the region. No? So this is kind of a specific difference in the incentive mechanism that these kind of transactions are bringing. So similar to this one, we completed one in Ecuador last year. In this case, the IDB and the U.S. Development Finance Corporations provided a credit guarantee and a political risk insurance to back this. The for conversion, that because of the amount of debt that was repurchased, was the largest debt for nature conversions in the world so far. So this transaction allowed the country to unlock savings of up to $323 million that will be destined to finance conservation activities in the Galapagos Marine Reserve during the next 18 years. No? And furthermore, in this case in particular, given the specific financial conditions that the country was facing at the time of the financial closure of the transaction, this transaction generated an additional $1.1 billion in savings that in this case will be processed as fiscal savings. No? So in this case, it provided a debt relief in addition to the more than $300 million for conservation in Galapagos. No? So in the same manner as in the transaction in Barbados, there was a series of commitments that the country agreed to, and there's a series of incentives to or extra payments that the country must pay in case it does not comply with the intended targets in the intended years. No? And again, in case this is the case, these payments will go to fund extra activities in Galapagos. No? So they remain in the conservation arena. So these are two examples, the most recent ones. I think it's an interesting and important evolution in the use of either the credit instrument, the guarantee instrument itself, which is not a new instrument. We've had a sovereign credit guarantee instrument for many years, but it is an innovative use to put this credit enhancement instrument in the context of a debt for nature conversion. And also the innovative part of, and we must recognize this is not the first time that the for nature swaps are done, or they have been done many years ago, but this new generation of debt for nature conversions involve not only the credit enhancement component provided by multilateral development banks or development financial institutions, but and also they involve the participation of several international development actors that contribute to build this institutional infrastructure to better guarantee that the funds that will be unlocked from these transactions are adequately invested in the conservation arena. No? And this involves the creation of these independent trust funds, the establishment of these commitments, and all those incentive mechanisms. So yes, so I believe that there is a potential for innovative financial instruments as these ones to help mobilize resources towards biodiversity and other sustainable goals. And maybe speaking a little bit more generally on a broader strategy to leverage financial markets to drive investments towards conservation, I believe that any strategy should consider three crucial elements that are linked between them and involve different stakeholders. No? And one of them is, first of all, as Clemente was saying at the beginning, identifying strategic sectors and goals. No? Then we have the need to continue developing the capital markets themselves. And finally, there is the need to continue the support provided by multilateral development banks and public development banks for these goals. No? So in first place, regarding about the crucial sectors, there is still a challenge to develop tools to analyze and quantify the intended impacts so that we can establish clear roadmaps for action. Sometimes we know that biodiversity is important and the importance of sustainable economy, but there is not always the clear metrics to measure how can we progress towards this objective. No? And also, as Marta was saying, there are still enough tools to measure and give an economic value that is necessary as an input to model and to better construct these structures, no? And make them more efficient toward the targets. So that in first place. In second place, I think any strategy should consider lines of action to develop capital markets. For example, with regard to capital markets instruments such as thematic bonds or SLB bonds or loans, there is still a challenge to increase their efficacy and impact. For example, through better definition of KPIs, better design of incentive mechanisms, and better design of monitoring and reporting processes that are an integral part of all these instruments. And furthermore, there is also a challenge to construct internationally accepted principles for new innovative financing structures, as for example, the for nature conversions, so that investors are more comfortable when facing these prospects of investments, no? Because these are complex structures and sometimes the standards are still not clear in regards of how do we compare this, for example, to the ICMA principles. So there's still a lot of work to expand this and construct these principles. No? And well, of course, there is also a challenge to continue improving the capital market regulation to foster the enabling environment for this type of investments. And well, finally, but not least important, NDBs and development banks have the challenge of continuing the development of their own instruments to better support capital market. For example, on the IDB side, we have the policy-based guarantees, we have investment guarantees, we have blended finance structures, and we are looking forward to fine-tune the operational and manual for these instruments to be better suited for the specific needs that the countries are facing and which are evolving with time. And also, MDBs and public development banks play a crucial role in supporting issuers by providing capacity building assistance, for example, by supporting the development of frameworks for bonds, strengthening debt management offices, which play a crucial role when thinking about how to incorporate sustainability concerns in the fiscal management of the countries. And also, the NDBs are very important to provide support for issuers in terms of capacity building for monitoring and reporting. So yeah, to finalize, I believe that to address the challenge of mobilizing capital markets towards conservation efforts, a high degree of coordination between all of these stakeholders is required. No? And all public development banks and multilateral development banks are well positioned to support countries in this regard.
All right. Thank you so much, Sebastian, also for this intervention, also for providing the practical insights to a topic actually we had also discussed during the whole 3 days. So now it's your turn. Look around. We have not too much time because we have to be very punctual later for also certification ceremony. So your questions. You have now the stage. We have heard the 4 different interventions, more strategic, more practical, and also again a bit more holistic. So your questions. Oh, you have a direct comment on the other interventions, maybe.
No, I wanted to, raise 2 things out of the 3 presentations. One is the issue of the blended funds as a very powerful instrument to leverage the limitations that many development banks have to mobilize resources. The blended fund and the blended strategy, because I think there's not only blended funds, there are blended strategies, really is fundamental to scale up. And I think that the examples that were given by Brazil are key. The other conclusion that I also wanted to raise from this was what Maria Jose said is we cannot leave people behind. And in these transitions that we're discussing here, the importance of just transitions is key. And development banks, again, it's difficult for private sector sometimes to understand the need of combining the 2 dimensions, the big transformations, the big investments, with the fact that you need to bring the small communities, the small companies, that if you don't bring them along, you really are going to have a very, a bad transition. And that's where, again, maybe through the blended funds or through lending, but it's very important for development banks to have that in their DNA, to understand that these big programs have always to come along with the support to small communities and SMEs that you need to bring them to the big programs. If not, those communities will be left behind. And you may solve the problem for the larger elements, but at the end, the big communities will not. And that is key in the strategies that development banks follow on all these climate change and biodiversity strategies. So I just wanted to highlight those 2 important things.
Thank you very much. Questions? Yes, please, over there, and then over there. Maybe you can collect the 2 questions and then we address them.
Well, for you, Mr. Clemente, you mentioned PPPs and your experiences, I think, 15 years ago. Can you tell us more precisely but shortly what was your challenges regarding this model, especially regarding risk of those, let's say, companies, developers, which were their experiences, how do they choose them, by the public procurement or another way, and what the experience 15 years ago, are they product profitable, are they going well, or that's what...
Well, thanks for the question. Yes. At that point in time, the local financial markets really didn't know about project finance. And the PPPs at the end, the PPP program relies on the possibility that private sector construction companies can raise funding to build the concessions over 25, 30 years operations. And, well, the risk is, I mean, there was a combination of elements. You know, there were risks that you could take as a project financier. I mean, and that was the key issue. Local financial markets didn't really, and construction companies both, they were not fully familiarized with project finance. And in project finance, through contracts, you can identify what is the source of the risk and then how you can handle it and manage it, and you can price it, and that goes in the finance instrument. So that was a big part of the structure. But there are some risks that are difficult to, even through project finance, to cover. Those were key to be covered by the government, and that's where the blended finance strategy came in. The government took some of those larger risks, like environmental licensing. You never know when the licensing is going to come out. So the project could suffer substantially if the license delayed extremely. The government offered to cap that risk. It was the government, not the project finance contract. So the combination of a good contract, of a PPP, a project finance contract, with these blended finance strategies or sources provided by the central government, created a framework that made it very attractive to international construction companies, to financial institutions to come in. That's how we were able to mobilize. And the development bank, and I want to raise that because the development bank was key on that. First, on helping bring the contracts, the project finance negotiation of the contract, a standard contract, to lead the way, even bringing the private commercial banks that were not that familiarized with that.
Yes, yeah.
And then provide even guarantees to some of the risks that were still left. So the government support, the project finance contract, and the development bank leadership and guarantees, that system did allow this big program to be funded.
Thank you very much. But you mentioned one of the key things that I was interested in, that a project should be attractive enough to attract international constructing company, which obviously had a creditworthiness and a banking background. They're bankable, they can produce, provide guarantees, etc. So it's much more easier than when you're starting with the companies which has no experience, creditworthiness at all, and you don't know, in fact, how the project will go on. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question.
And you can actually add now sustainability element. We're now advising a group of construction companies and finance to how we bring in circularity, biodiversity into those contracts, and in order to elevate the contribution of infrastructure to climate change. And that with those contracts.
I take two more questions. I saw one over there and one over there. Maybe we start with you.
Yes, thank you. Yes, to Maria Jose, that the work you are doing in communities is very important. And here in Colombia, we are facing big challenge with these type of communities, especially in the regions that we need to develop sustainability infrastructure projects. So how can we as development bank, national development banks, to help solve these problems?
Thank you very much. Yeah, we're working very hard, and it's been very difficult, but we are achieving it. Blended finance are, of course, a very nice and very good instrument and a very interesting tool. you're right. You need allies in the regions, and you need to identify how to get there. In our case, we have 70 microfinance institutions to get there. But we need them to understand and to know how to address that kind of risk and that kind of specific projects. So, example, SECO, the Swiss International Corporation, is helping us to enhance and to help micro institutions to know, to address in a better way, to understand, to enhance their knowledge about development, growth, and be greener in the responsibility in the process of giving a credit, so lending money in a better way to address that kind of topics. We need microfinance institutions in the region. That is the way, because we can't do it ourselves from Bogota.
Thank you so much. Before you address your question, Christian, and I would like to also whoever will answer to this question very briefly. Meanwhile, the four of you can think about like one key message you would like to give to all the DFIs who are present, and also like the commercial banks who are present here today. What should they do? What would you advise them to move forward in mobilizing more finance for nature-based solutions, for biodiversity, but also for climate change? Think about you will have only 30 seconds, each of you. But before that, Christian, your last question.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you very much for the meaningful presentations. I would like to know what are your thoughts, or what's the approach that the institutions you are representing are following for climate actions, for example, like the RED Plus projects? What do you think? What's the approach you are following related to these kind of projects? Mainly because of the risk. Well, not recent. We have known several concerns about the proper management of the environmental and social safeguards, perhaps some overestimation of the climate action impacts resulting from those projects. So it would be very interesting to know what's the approach you are following, or your thoughts related to this kind of climate actions.
I would give the question, because you asked everyone, I would ask direct the question to Marta.
Yes, sure. Thank you for the question. BNDES is not buying carbon credits. We actually we launched a public call to buy the carbon credits, and we, in our process of due diligence of the projects, because BNDES has really a thorough due diligence, and we visit the projects, we came up with a lot of problems. And most of them were not able to fulfill the requirements of the bank to contract the project. So we gave up. We said, no, maybe this is not the best way of, this is the strategy now. This is not the best way to foment the carbon credit market, because the other strategy was, it's a new market, we have to start buying credits so we can develop the market. And BNDES, with its capital market branch, has done this in other new markets before. So it was not something new that we were doing. But since the experience of the public call and the due diligence of the projects, and then came up the problems and that were appearing with the methodology of Vera. And then we took a step back and we said, no, let's change the strategy. And we're not buying credits anymore, but we are financing the projects through Floresta Viva. The Amazon Fund is another mechanism. It's a RED Plus fund, but it's not a carbon credit. It's a fund based on results. So Brazil has to decrease deforestation first, then receive the funds. So it's not carbon credits. So the approach of BNDES right now is to take a step back, and we are financing, and we are prioritizing the restoration projects instead of the REDD+ projects, because we believe that the best way of put a price on nature, as I said, is not by carbon credit, but we have to create a mechanism to value nature. And it's not carbon credit. It's not, I think it's not appropriate for the conservation projects. It has we have to create another mechanism. So I hope I could answer your question.
Thank you so much, Marta, for the answer. So, as I said, unfortunately, we have to stop this conversation now. As I've mentioned earlier, what is your key message to your fellows here in the room, to your peers here in the room from the different DFIs? Everyone has 30 seconds. We start with Sebastian.
Sure, I would say my main suggestion will be to analyze and quantify the intended, support your clients to analyze and quantify intended impacts in order to establish roadmap actions. And also work together with your clients to understand the financial environment of the transactions they're requesting in order to identify the most appropriate instrument to support their goals. And also work with them on building their capacity to monitor and reporting, which is a crucial part of these transactions. So that will be my main suggestion.
Thank you. Now, Maria Jose.
I would say we have to make an effort to simplify language and to have a better understanding and to help others to understand how to implement that kind of projects and how address and understand adaptation and mitigation to climate change. Simplify language.
Simplifying language, very good. Marta, what is your key message to the audience?
I would say that to know the context. I mean, each territory has a climate and a nature biodiversity challenge. And we should be, the development banks should be where no one else is going. So we should be in the top of the mountain or in the bottom of the mountain, I don't know. But we should be where we have to innovate and we have to go where no one else is going. And so we could scale up these projects. We have to be big. We have to, we can't rely anymore on small little projects. We have to, these little projects, they need to be in a bigger strategy so we can be scaling up the preservation of nature and the transition of the climate transition.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, Clemente, you have the last word.
Well, two main recommendations. One, knowledge and capacity building. You have to really increase the resources put into that to really build the capacity in your institutions to really lead the way. And the second one, in order to endorse that, you need to get a stronger mandate from the senior officials from your organizations to really prioritize this topic. I mean, this has to become one of the most important topics within your institutions, because really, I think development banks are the key players in this transformation. So seek for that mandate, which is key for that.
Thank you so much. I think this summarizes everything very well. Speaking the same language, looking at the context, think big, providing it really from like in the big picture, and as far as we do it here these 3 days, build the knowledge, build the capacities, not only in you as you have attended, but also spread this information in your institutions. I think this is a very good closing word. So thank you everyone, Sebastian, Marta, Maria Jose, Clemente, for this very interesting panel discussion. Thank you for joining us, and then we have a quick change here, and then we continue with the next session. Thank you so much.
Hello, hello. Okay. Can I ask for the session 17? Thank you. We are running a little bit over time, so I'm very sorry. I will be skipping some of the slides, but anyways, As you remember, we have the methodology to repeat some stuff so that you remember. So maybe today I will not be repeating too much, okay? So I'm sorry, we will be skipping slides. I didn't have time to update, kind of to hide some of the slides. So the last